Hello and welcome to Loyal Tops Creations. This is Lucy, and to recap, last week we spoke about jump rings and split rings, which are a basic step in jewelry making. And this week I want to speak about making loops, which is another basic step in your jewelry making. Now, to make loops, we need some tools. The first tool we will need is a flush cutter. It's called a flush cutter because if you look at the back, the blades are flush together. In the front, you can see that there's a groove. If you have a pair of flush cutters or cutters like this, just have a look. The front, there's a groove, a serrated edge that shows it's not flush, but the back is flush. This is another type of flush cutter. Then we need chain nose pliers. These are the chain nose pliers. And then we need some round nose pliers to make a loop. Perhaps you need a ruler as well. Now, when you're making loops in jewelry, that's loops like this on your bead, loops like this on your bead, you need to try and make them the same size on all your beads so that your work is consistent, so that your work looks the same, so that if you're using or making 10 or 15 of these, they all come out the same size. Because if you are connecting them together and the loops are all of different sizes, it's not going to make your work or your creation look or hang right. If there are earrings, for instance, something like this, if the loops are different, one might drop longer than the other, and so on. So we always try to make the loops consistent. Now, to do that, we use these round nose pliers. But in using these round nose pliers to make the loop, we need to sort of get the loops at the same size. Now, if you look at your round nose pliers, they're smaller at the tip and wider at the bottom. So you need to decide where along the round nose pliers you're going to put your loop, because that will depict how big it's going to be. So what I do is to take a marker and mark somewhere near the tip where I want the size of the loop. You can see that I've marked these already. So I give it a little mark so that I know that once I place the wire on this mark, all my loops will be consistent. But then you also need to look at the fact that when you use your marker to do that, if you look at the top mark and the bottom mark, they will give you different sizes of loops. So you need to decide which side you're going to use. Are you going to use the top or are you going to use the bottom? So it's a matter of preference, and it gives you different size loops. So if you want a smaller size loop, you probably use the top. If you want the loop to be bigger, you probably use the bottom. So I always use the top. So that's for that. And then, so that's that. And then let's start. Now to start with, I'm going to use head pins. I will use some head pins. These are the head pins. I'll use the head pins to show you how to make a loop. So you take one head pin and put on the bead, and now we want to make a loop. Definitely we don't need the whole length of the head pin to make a loop. We just need a little bit to make our loop. and to make our bend. But before we do that, we need to make sure that the head pin is at a 90-degree angle with the bead. So you take your chain nose pliers, make sure the head pin is right in the bead, and then bend the top of the head pin, but we want it at a 90-degree angle. So you can finish the bend with your fingers if you want, and that's what we need to start with. Now, as I said before, we don't need the whole length of this head pin, we only need a little bit. And how do we gauge how much we need to make the loop? There are two things you can do. One is, if you look at a head pin that you have, maybe you've bought, you can undo it, could unravel it this way, and then measure how much was used to roll it. In this instance, it was about a centimeter. So I'm going to use a centimeter to make my loop. So I need to measure from the bend outwards 1 centimeter. There are various ways I think that people do it, but two ways that I use is I simply use a ruler. That's what I use most times. I use a ruler to measure the 1 centimeter. Once you measure the 1 centimeter, you take your flush cutters and use the flush side. If you use the other side, it's going to be longer. It will end up being longer. Use the flush side and cut off and mark off where 1 centimeter is and just cut the rest. Or some people that I know have ready-made board like this, the cardboard. They've cut out 1 centimeter, 1 centimeter square from the board. This is more than 1 centimeter. I use this for something else. This is 1 centimeter. So what they do is just to put the board on the bead like this. I'm not sure if you can see it properly, but let's say this is the board. That's the angle. So they cut it off, and then where the board ends, like here, they cut off 1 centimeter. So it all depends on what you want to do. But I use this sometimes, but I find it easier using my ruler. So let's do that. We use the flush side of your cutters and just cut off, mark off where 1 centimeter is and cut it off. Try and cut it in such a way that the rest of your head pin doesn't fly away, so that it doesn't injure somebody. So once you've done that, we now go back to our round nose pliers, because this is what we want to use to make the loop. We want to make the loop with this. So I'm going to use the top of my mark on the round nose pliers. So you put the rest of your head pin that you've cut off in the pliers. Make sure it is flush on this side so that you don't have anything coming out, otherwise it will end up being too big. And then you want to roll it back. You might not be able to roll it in just one turn of your hand, so you do it continuously until it's flush with the other side of the wire. So you hold the bottom of your bead and roll it. Remember, we are using the top of the marker. So roll it, continue rolling it until it is flush with the other side, and there you get it. But if it's not in the center, you just need to move it a little bit so that it is centered quite well. So that is your loop. That's the loop that you've made there. So let's make another one using a head pin. Can we make one more? Take your bead. Some people use their thumb to make the 90-degree angle. Well, it's up to you, but I like using the chain nose pliers, because it gives me just a tiny space at the bottom where I can use to measure. So you bend it. You won't be able to bend it right to the bottom 90 degrees, but use your finger, as I said, to make it at a 90-degree angle. Then what do? You need to measure off just 1 centimeter from the beginning of the head pin outwards. So you measure 1 centimeter, use your flush cutters, cut off the rest, and then use your round nose pliers. Remember, we're using the top, put them in, make sure it is flush. Take as long as you like to do it. Take as long as you like. As I said, practice makes perfect in everything. So just take as long as you like to do it until any beads as you like, and practice doing that. Now, when you've done these connectors, they're used for different things. You can connect them to earrings, tops, to make earrings, just as I've done here. You can see that if you look at this critically, you can see that they're the same length, same size. So if you're making like 20, 30 of these, you'll find out that using that method, they all come out at the same loop size. So that is using a head pin. Now let's try and connect some of them. So if we're going to connect some of them like this to make a bracelet, we cannot use a head pin because we won't be able to connect. Therefore, we're going to use our wire. This is classic jewelry wire, and I'm going to use 20 gauge. 20 gauge is strong enough, not too soft, not too hard, not too strong, that I'll be able to turn it, and it's not too soft that it will come open, because you don't want your loops, when you connect them together to make whatever you're making, you don't want your loops to open. So this is strong enough. Remember, the higher your gauge wire, the softer the wire is. So you need to remember that. So this is copper, is colored. This is the gold color, the gilt color. This is what I'm going to use. Now, to make my loops, I'm going to use these beads. They are 10 mm beads. They are sapphire blue jade beads. And for 10 mm, I usually cut off about 1.5 inches. So I cut off about 1.5 inches for 10 mm beads. Anything bigger than that, I'll probably cut off 2 inches and so on. But for 10 mm less, I cut off about 1.5 inches. So now to make our bracelet, definitely we've got to put links on each of our beads here. I've done a little, joined a little, but I'll show you how to do the rest. And a bracelet, a reasonable normal size bracelet will be about 7.5 inches, inclusive of your closure. In this one, I'm going to use a toggle clasp. You can use any clasp you like, but I'm going to use a toggle clasp. So what I'm going to do is to make the bracelets to about nearly 7 inches, and then I'll add my toggle clasp, or about 6.5, and I'll add my toggle clasp to it. So let's go. I've measured out a few of the 1.5 wires. Now, first of all, we need a loop at this end. So what do? We take our round nose pliers, put it at the mark we have, make sure it's flush, and then we roll it back until it meets the other side of the wire. Okay, now you've got a loop, but I want the wire a little bit, just a little bit. There we go. Then we take our bead, put it on, make our 90-degree angle, because you want to make it so flush. Sometimes the beads slip off, and then we measure our 1 centimeter. I don't want it more than 1 centimeter, so I have to be very careful. So I've got the 1 centimeter, and now I use my round nose pliers to roll it back. Flush, hold on to the bottom of the wire and roll it back so that you've got the other end. Now I always like my links to go the same way, so by the time I finish it, if one is facing a different way, I normally turn it a little bit so that I've got them in the same way. So when you've done that, remember you can easily open a loop, not by pulling, but by turning one forward, one backwards, one forward, one backwards. So let's do that, and then we can join. Remember, I said I like them to be all the same way up. And then you close it. So you've added one more link. Do the same thing until you finish these 4. We measure it. Okay, I've got about 6.5. I'll put one more, and then I'll add the clasp. Okay, now I want to add the clasp, and that's quite easy. Just open a link, put in one end of your clasp, close it back, make sure you close it tight enough, and then in the other end you also put the other end of the toggle. Always make sure your links are close together properly. So there you have your bracelet, which you can easily put around your hand. So that's a link bracelet for you. So that is how to make your links and make either a bracelet, a necklace, or link your earrings, whatever you want to do. That is how to do it using these tools. Now there is another method to make links which is much simpler, but I believe that everybody, well, not everybody, that it is always better to learn the basics before you even start to use so many tools, because the tools don't give you the basic knowledge. They're easy to use, make things easier, but they might not give you the basic knowledge you need, because learning how to make links, the knowledge you learn from this, you are still going to use to learn to make other things. So it is on. You cannot use the tool to make like wraps. When you want to wrap a bead, or you're going to make a sort of loop and then you're going to wrap it, you won't use a tool to do that. So this is just a link bracelet. You can use it to make a link necklace or your earrings. So next week we'll use the tool to make some links or some loops. So thank you for watching, and please remember to subscribe so that you will be able to see our videos, which come out every Friday at 7 p.m. So thank you once again for watching, and bye for now.